Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmar, and we're going to continue a few other shows when we talked about the mind over matter. This is a picture of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and not only was he a Rebbe, so he was an authority in Judaism, of course, but he also was a scientist and an engineer. So we like to combining, it's a major idea that I like personally doing, combining science and Torah. Well, because many times people think, well, religion, either they like or they don't, or even if they say fine and good. But of course, there's also science, and never the twain should meet. And that's really not true. And that's why I like bringing out just the opposite point of view, that really science and Torah Judaism are actually complementary, not only adverse or different, or you can categorize it in two different sections in your life. There's religions plus there's science. So that's what we do here too in this show, and this time it's going to be medicine. How that even in medicine, where again people would say, well, they don't tell you to take an aspirin in the Torah and the Bible. So what does Judaism have to tell us about medicine? But that's what we're here for, to inform everybody and to share new ideas. This idea is comply, then contemplate. In our practical day-to-day lives, we don't attach any importance to how food satisfies our hunger or how water slakes our thirst. The main thing is that it does. The same is true in spiritual terms. When the soul is hungry and thirsty for the bread of water of Torah and the mitzvot, the main thing is to satisfy it. Only afterwards, when the soul is a little stronger and healthier, can it properly grasp how the Torah and mitzvos help. Much easier and quicker than before, even though it has but a limited human intellect. One who insists that he first wished to be healed, and only then will dedicate some of his free time to understand the need for Torah and the mitzvahs, and only after understanding it will he begin to do it, can be compared to a patient who refuses to take his medicine until he finishes studying medicine and is able to understand how these pills will heal his illness. Common sense tells us the contrary. If he takes the medicine, that itself will make it easier for him to understand and to study the areas of medical knowledge in which he is interested. This is just even a basic lesson from medicine, that if the doctor tells you, everybody should be healthy, but if it tells you to take a medicine, says what, this pill, that pill, why, when, well, your curiosity, and you are maybe intelligent, so you want to find out, fine. No one's saying to find out, but in the meantime, if something's wrong, then you take the medicine and you listen to doctor's orders. So right there, it's like something that Torah insists, so something goes back and forth. Something Torah tells us to do it, fine, and then afterwards understand. But even if you don't, people maybe understand what medicine, some people don't. Some people say, well, I don't think I need it. I don't need my high blood pressure medicine. I feel fine. So that's why you have always the commercials and doctors telling you, well, it may not hurt you, but you need to take it. Doctor understands, and you don't, maybe. So therefore, you have to listen to doctor's orders. And the same thing we can reflect back to Judaism. There's a lot of things that are important in Jewish life, and I don't think I need it. Well, you have to listen to authority. If an authority tells you that they think you really do need it, then you have to listen. You want to understand, and you want to figure out what's the authorities say and not to have blind knowledge, fine. No one's stopping you from understanding anything. But in the meantime, you have to take your medicine. Addiction to treatment. There are special diets, rest regimens, and medicines administered in hospitals for each patient according to his needs. It is obvious that such a regimen not helpful for healthy people and can even be extremely harmful. For example, some medications are poisonous, can only be taken in precise quantities for specific ailments. There's no need to warn a healthy person not to behave this way, However, it is necessary to warn someone who is not completely healthy or has recently recovered from an illness during which he became accustomed to such regimens that he should not continue in this manner after his recovery. Similarly, doctors who see the benefits of these modes of behavior in their life-saving work must be reminded that they are beneficial only for sick people and can be harmful for anyone else. Just as doctors must provide remedies for their patients, they must also instruct them to stop them once they are healed. It is only then that the doctor fulfilled his obligation to his patients, both for the present and for the future. The doctors, too, despite their constant involvement in setting up these diets and administering these remedies, must not fool themselves into thinking that they should act the same way. They must always remember that their activities are only for the ill, whom they were given the permission and ability to be able to heal, while the doctors themselves must behave like other healthy people. There is a correlation for all this in spiritual healing as well. Despite the fact that it has recently become necessary to accept certain compromises for the sake of rescuing Jewish souls, seemingly the Rebbe was referring to the inclusion of secular studies in some schools' curriculums, as well as some schools that allow for co-ed student bodies. We must always remember that this is no more than a temporary necessity, since at this point in time these students are not yet ready to accept Judaism in its entirety. The ultimate goal, however, is to reach a point where the students will become completely healthy and there will no longer be a need for these methods. Only when the educators explain this idea to their students have they truly fulfilled their present and future obligations. Well, this is an important point. Ultimately, it does happen. I mean, again, majority of people know to take a medicine for 10 days, and anyway, you can't get it because that's why they say no refills, the doctors tell the pharmacist. But unfortunately, it does happen that people get hooked on different drugs and then they have a need, or they feel they have a need for even more, and this is a very serious problem. So this is just the idea where nowadays we have space shuttles, but of course I always tell everybody I'm 29 years old, don't look at my white beard. But in any case, the earlier rocket ships, when they went up, they needed a big boost. So they had a lot of fuel on them, but then the canister that carried that fuel at the bottom was once it ran out of fuel, was just a drag, just a big heavy piece of metal just dragging the spaceship. So they released the bottom section that had the fuel, that had the booster rockets, and they just let it go, and it dropped it probably into the ocean, and it wasn't needed. So I remember the Rebbe said that's also a lesson for sometimes you need a crutch. I mean, just like a person on a crutch, if you need it, you need it, but it doesn't mean, okay, here's your crutch, stay on the crutches the rest of your life. When you're done needing the crutch, get rid of it. So like the rocket ship, once you needed that boost, and once you're up in space, you don't need that booster. If anything, it becomes a drag on you, just like a crutch would be just a drag on you if you don't need it. So certain times you need it, but then you have to know to release. It's an important point, I think, for a lot of people, I mean, probably not for most people, that even people stay at home with their parents, for example, that's some psychological need. Certain times, surely you need your parents. There's no issue about it. Not a discussion, but later on in life, you have to get independent in your life. So really, if you think about it, there's a lot of practical instances, not only, of course, in medicine that we're talking about, but in Jewish and just also in regular life, that sometimes you need a little bit of a crutch in life, but afterwards you're done, just go by yourself. And here's an idea of bitter and sweet remedies. According to your letter, this is what the Rebbe writes: you are involved with ensuring the spiritual and emotional health of your students, who are compared to children. Since the Almighty rewards us measure for measure, it is obvious what a great effect that would have on the health of your actual children. Furthermore, the Rambam writes in Maimonides that the soul can be healthy or ill, much like the body. Regarding physical cures, there are two possibilities. A patient can sometimes be healed only with a bitter medicine, while at other times a sweet remedy can affect the cure. The difference can be quite drastic, especially when the treatment continues for some time. This is the basic difference between the path of Musar and that of Hasidus. These are two philosophies in Judaism. One in the Musar is rebuke. It emphasizes the negative and how it should be avoided. The other hand, which we teach as Hasidus, on the other hand, highlights the spiritual sublimity of the soul and reveals within it its positive potential. Therefore, you should set aside a time for the learning of the Hasidic philosophy. And the Rebbe writes, and I am hopeful that you are always peruse these subjects occasionally, but it is not the same as truly establishing a fixed time to learn. And the first Lubavitcher writes that the main thing is not merely the fixing of hours of study, but rather to use the time to truly fix the concepts within one's soul. Many times I know it happens with people, they learn and they read it and they can even mimic, give over the idea of what they were taught, but in Torah they have to incorporate that into yourself. Such a dedication will obviously also be expressed in your influence upon your students. The Torah's ways are ways of pleasantness, and nothing can stand in the way of will. So if you want to do something, you will do it, and really in all the ways it's a nice way, but like I always tell people that anything you want in life you have to work for. That's a major idea, of course. You want a better job, you go to college, you go to vocational school, you go to school altogether, and maybe you don't like the test and the subject is hard, but you keep on pursuing it and you come out at the end better off for it. And you can think of many, many examples for yourself where it's tough to attain it, but once you get there, it's great. So too in the ways of Judaism and Torah, that it takes a little effort, but once you're there, it's all pleasant. Now, it's an interesting idea where it says hardship immunizes. Should not be put off by regular hardships that accompany such an undertaking, a new beginning of Torah true education. Recognizing the statement of our sages that all beginnings are difficult. On the contrary, your challenges should arouse within you additional strength and should reveal your hidden talents. One of the modern medical discoveries has been that in order to enable the body to withstand harsh diseases, it is injected with a vaccine that contains a mild form of the virus or disease, since that stimulates the body to produce antibodies to fight against it. The same is true with regard to spiritual healing, in accordance with the statement in the Maimonides that compares spiritual treatments to physical ones. A temporary concealment which is in true only weak and imagined stimulates the soul to create the needed weapons to overcome true challenges and concealments. That's again a very beautiful idea where, like a vaccine, sometimes a little bit of a challenge just makes you stronger for it to overcome. Education is a vaccine. Just as we attempt to provide our children with the best possible physical good, we must also attempt to provide for them spiritually in the best possible manner. Just as we must worry about their physical health, we must also worry about their spiritual well-being. A Jew visited me recently, and the Rebbe is writing a letter, and we discussed education. He told me that statistics have shown that a bad education only harms 5% of children. I asked him if he vaccinated his children for measles, polio, etc. He replied, of course, we are parents. Do you know what percentage of children who do not receive the vaccine actually contract the disease? I asked. He happened to know the statistics. Less than 3 or 4%. In other words, even for a possibility of 4%, and especially in these countries where these diseases are even more rare, it is still worthwhile to vaccinate with all the pain that it causes. Why? Who cares about those minor inconveniences as compared to what possibly could happen without vaccinating? I said to him, if for a doubt of 4% it is worth causing the child pain, and during the child's screaming and all the other effects of the vaccination, just to avoid the disease, even though for the most part there's not even a possibility of any life danger, but rather just severe discomfort for some time, how much more so it is worthwhile to ensure the health of the child's soul, where the doubt is 5% and where the vaccine does not cause any pain. All that is required is to sign the child up for studies in a Torah true educational facility. This action will affect his entire life. It's very interesting again, where, like I use my example, the Russian roulette, where people say, well, could be your child comes out good and people didn't do anything and the kid came out great. And it's true, but it's like what the Rebbe said here. I mean, you can go to Vegas and say, well, I'll make my fortune in Vegas. It's true, there are few people who do it, but are you going to put all your money and that's your whole chance, your whole life on that little chance? So again, that's the same idea here, that a little chance, you just try to forewarn and you just don't really take your life in your hands for a little chance. This is in a case of disease or in winning the lottery. Put all your money in the New York State lottery. I mean, to play a little bit is one thing, but you don't put all your savings in there. So the same thing with life, that here a person should consider having Torah education for their children, even though maybe they think they will be good, and maybe they will be good, could be, but you don't want to take that chance. This is with a knife and a mask. You are bewildered at the fact that you see no explanation for the unfortunate events that happen to your family and home. If you think about it, it will not bewilder you. Man sees only a small part of what happens around him and to him. As a result, sometimes he cannot properly evaluate the events that he witnesses. In order to properly illustrate this idea, consider the following example. A person happens to walk into an operating room in a medical center. He sees a man lying on the operating table. All around him are people with various types of knives in their hands, and they are cutting his flesh. The victim cries out in distress, and yet they continue their surgery. Without knowing the complete history of the patient, the observer will run out screaming, "They took a live person and they're mutilating him." He's crying out in pain, but he can't save himself. He cannot free himself from these thieves and murderers. However, if someone explains to the visitor that the surgery is required to enable the patient to live for 10 more years, and that is why they are ignoring the relatively short-lived pains, he will understand and fully agree to the treatment. He will realize that not only are the ones cutting into the person's flesh not thieves or murderers, but rather they are doing the greatest possible favor to the patient. This, despite the fact that the surgeons cannot guarantee that the operation will be successful, nor can they know how long the patient will live afterwards, even if it is successful. The lesson is clear. In a person's life, truly painful events are bound to occur. However, when one acknowledges and recognizes divine providence, that the world is not a free-for-all, but rather is run in a very exact fashion, and that order includes not only the person himself, but also his family and everybody else, then a logical mind will conclude that the events taking place must fit with that general order, even if the Surgeon General does not explain to him the great benefits derived from this temporary pain. Meaning again, that certain times, again, we were talking about the authority. If some doctor tells surgery and it hurts and this is craziness, what's he doing to me? He's supposed to make me feel better, and then he hurts me. Say with a vaccine also, as we said before. But again, if someone who's an authority knows what's best for you, then those are the best things for you. There are those who challenge you whether the world does indeed have a purposeful order. Nonetheless, it is well known from physics, chemistry, astronomy, which are familiar not only to Jews, but not only to people who believe in God, and even to non-believers as well, that every single atom in the universe is governed very specific laws, and its every movement is governed in accordance with those laws. One's whole environment, indeed the universe as a whole, behaves in a precise and orderly way, which of course includes all the events pertaining to an individual and his family. Imagine that we enter a huge building with thousands of rooms. Every room is extremely organized to the point that even a casual observer readily recognizes that everything in it is proper place. There's just one small room that he is unsure about. Is everything here set up correctly? Surely we would all reach the same conclusion. If all those thousands of rooms are set up in a meticulously organized fashion, surely this one little room, whose setup I cannot understand, but which is nevertheless a part of this huge building, must also be organized and suited for its purpose, even if I cannot comprehend how. Right, so that's really, if everything makes sense and the world does run, fairly well. You have to think, the winter, the summer, we're not too cold, we're not too hot. For the most part, the world goes and is organized and people are living. Right, obviously there's people in the hospital and there's people that don't have food. There are few people, but we have to understand this is all part of the major plan also. It's all a part of it. Overcoming disabilities. A person walks out of a professor's office limping on crutches. A passerby might think, look how incompetent that professor is. This fellow went to him, paid him a lot of money, kept all of his instructions, and he's still walking on crutches. He can't even take a single step without them. The truth is, however, that before the treatment, this patient was completely paralyzed and unable to move his feet at all. The professor managed to lessen the paralysis and enabled the patient to not only move his feet, but even to walk with the assistance of crutches. As time passes, his condition will continue to improve. In fact, it's possible that if he continues with the professor's prescribed treatments, he will eventually be completely healed and not even need the crutches anymore. The meaning of this parable. Just as people's faces don't look alike, their minds are not alike. Some people are born with better characteristics and some with worse. With good educators, and even more importantly through self-education, the negative characteristics can only be weakened over time. Since people are supposed to continuously educate themselves through their entire lives, it is no surprise that we may find people who are presently in the middle of the process. An individual may still possess some negative qualities, but that does not reflect on the doctor's instructions. On the contrary, as a result of his involvement in the treatment, the failings are much smaller than they would be otherwise. I think this is an issue, maybe I can extrapolate on it, because sometimes people, and I get this question a lot, so that's why I'm addressing it, why sometimes people are Torah Orthodox Jews, and they get in the papers, they did something wrong, they stole. So how could it be if, they're following the Torah, that they're not supposed to steal and be bad people? So I think this is a good example for it, because they're in the process of bettering themselves. You really wouldn't know what would they be without the Torah. So maybe they would be total mafia people, who knows? So therefore you can't just look at a person and say, oh, they're bad and they're no good and they're not the proper way, but you have to look at the whole picture. And I think that's one of the common points that we're talking about, these idea of lessons we can get from medicine, that certain things bad happen, or like we see a person obviously knows when a person's getting a shot. They're in the doctor's office, the doctor's not a murderer, things like that, of course. But I mean, if you be a little naive and you think about it, you say there is a little bit pain. I saw about, you talk to a child in school, oh, I don't want to go. Oh, I don't. Hey, you got to go. I mean, I like it, it's work, and they're making you write an assignment, etc. We know all the troubles there, but we know it's the best thing for a person. Just likewise, person goes to a doctor, oh, it's going to hurt, they're going to the dentist, this, it's going to hurt. Well, maybe it will. Maybe you are right. But we know that's the proper thing to do, is to go to the dentist and let him do his thing, and the doctor do their thing, follow doctor's orders, and the teachers and follow the teacher's orders, in order that the greater good will come out of it. But that's a super lesson in life. Certain things that happen to us and say, well, why it's happening to that person? And they're in the midst of being treated, quote unquote, from divine providence, and that's a reason why they have to go through these things. And you got to get the bigger picture in order to understand what's happening in this instance that we're looking at. So I think that's a incredible lessons that we have to learn from. As we said at the beginning of the show, you can learn from everything. And here's medicine, and it goes back and forth. Medicine teach you how to be a better person, and the idea behind it, and taking Jewish and Torah ideas where there's a higher authority and you have to listen to a higher authority, it makes you be a better person and a patient. Many people do not follow doctor's orders, unfortunately, and a lot of medicines are not, prescriptions are not filled because people don't want to take their medicine. So I think back and forth, medicine can teach Judaism and Judaism can teach medicine. Therefore, this is the way we linked science to Torah, which is, again, instead of decompartmentalizing everything in one area or the other, we can bring everything together into one happy unity. Thank you very much.